Without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Danny Fitzgerald. He is the Regional Director for the San Diego Imperial SBDC Regional Network, and he also oversees the San Diego Women's Business Center. He's been a prominent fixture in the small business communities of San Diego and also Imperial County on both sides of the U.S. and Mexico border. His service in a wide variety of leadership and executive roles has made a significant impact on hundreds of businesses and dozens of industries throughout the state of California. He also holds a master's in communication from the San Diego State University and also a bachelor's in history from the University of Utah. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Danny.
Fantastic. Thanks, Faustine. Appreciate our partnership with the Better Business Bureau, being able to help businesses. So obviously we were able to do a number of webinars in 2020 talking about all the different types of disaster relief and so forth. So real quick, just before we kind of get rolling, the Small Business Development Center, we are funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration for our network. We're also funded by the state of California, and we're here to be able to assist folks with all types of business. Really, our mission is simple: as we are here to help small businesses start and grow. So that means all different types of assistance that we provide. And of course, during these disaster times, it really has been a lot about everything from the federal and state relief programs, and then of course we've done a lot in terms of helping folks as they've gone through the myriad of changes that are for public health guidelines. So for everything from working with restaurants as they were able to move to outdoor operations, to retail spaces as they needed to learn some best practices on how to configure and so forth. And so that's a lot of what we're able to provide. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and go through this, because today we're going to talk about the most recent federal stimulus. This is really about the Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the second draw, or what simply can be called PPP2. So I'm going to talk extensively about that. There are other things that were part of the federal stimulus that was passed by Congress and signed into law at the very end of 2020. And so we do have a number of updates, and we update that page as updates come out. That's that you can certainly see there, which is our website, which is sdivsbdc.org/federal-stimulus. I do see folks that are in Arizona. My service territory is the two southernmost counties of California, but we do have our counterparts, which are the Arizona SBDC. And if in your other parts of Southern California, we have other SBDC networks there too. So we're happy to be able to get you to them, but I know they do fantastic jobs too, with my counterparts in those other areas. That's the nice thing about SBDCs nationwide is you can actually find one in any state or territory that's probably close to you, and be able to get some excellent service and assistance with this. And if you need any help with that, you can actually go to that same website. You go to the contact us, and we actually have a link there to be able to find any SBDC in the country. So want to get into now the Paycheck Protection Program. Of course, it reopened earlier this month. And it was a staggered reopening. I'm sure all of us remember the rather chaotic, I guess would be the best way to put it, opening that happened last April when PPP first rolled out. And so the SBA learned, and the banks learned a lot of lessons from that. And so one of the things they did was kind of stagger the reopening, was mainly for smaller institutions, as well as a priority for folks who had not received PPP. Since then, everything's back open, including the second draw PPP. And that second draw PPP really is that. It is truly a second draw, taking into account the fact that your initial PPP of 8 to 24 weeks for you to be able to spend the money. Here we are rolling into month 11 of the pandemic, and all the, everything from stay-at-home orders to limited openings and all the different public health restrictions. And so it truly is just kind of like being able to get a second batch of that same funds. But, one of the things I'm going to reiterate a number of times during this is still a look back, and all the calculations are based upon and assuming and really looking at your 2019 payroll. And again, similar to how things were, all of the PPP rules and regulations are for businesses that were in operation prior to February 15th, 2020. So that's the line that the federal government drew. for all these different programs. There's a lot of different lines. The line the federal government has is February 15th, 2020, that a business had to have been in operation. So the PPP2, which I'll talk about here in just a second, really is for a second draw for folks that can demonstrate a particular loss in revenue. And so the key eligibility component, number one, is that you must have spent down all of your first PPP loan. Of course, the loan said you had to spend it all down on eligible expenses for forgiveness prior to December 31st, 2020. And we'll talk again about what those eligible expenses are. But in short, 60% on payroll, 40% on core operation expenses like rent and utilities. That's really what it needed to have been. And so does not mean you need to have applied for forgiveness or been granted forgiveness. You're merely going to be certifying that you have spent it on those eligible expenses. And guess what? You're going to be applying for forgiveness, so the SBA is going to know whether you did or didn't. But that really isn't an issue. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the forgiveness updates towards the end of the presentation. The second one is this is actually for smaller entities. So again, small, because the federal government's limits really are 500 employees. Now they've lowered it down to 300 employees for the second draw. And I'll talk about on the next slide how it's capped at $2 million as well, and what that particularly means. The third component of eligibility is that you must show, and this is really the core component, is the 25% loss in gross receipts when compared to a quarter from 2019 versus 2020. So for example, I am a restaurant. From April through June of 2019, my gross receipts were $200,000. For April through June of 2020, my gross receipts were $100,000. I qualify. I'm a retail space. I actually want to use the fourth quarter because that was really rough for me. And my fourth quarter is always typically really high. So in 2019, my gross receipts were $100,000. And in 2020, my gross receipts were $50,000. Both instances clearly qualify for that. So what you do want to do is make sure, no matter what, you can prove it. For loans over $150,000, you actually have to provide that proof to the lender. That is a requirement that they have. What can that proof be? It can be your financials, so your income statements and P&L statements that you would have from like a QuickBooks or other financial software, but you will have to certify the accuracy of those. It's a self-certification, but you will need to certify it. The second way, which is simple for in particular very small businesses, is you can use your bank statement. So I look at my operating account where I put all the deposits for my accounts receivable into, and I compare my July through September of 2019 through my July to September of 2020, and actually show what the actual deposits were, total those up, and that's a way in which you could do it. At the end, you can actually use your filed tax returns if that shows that particular loss. Of course, right now, absolutely nobody has completed their 2020 tax return. So that's more for a little bit later. And that really applies to kind of where I have that other bullet point, that if your loan for your second draw is under $150,000, you don't have to provide that at the time of application. You will have to provide that at the time of forgiveness. So that's why I emphasize this point very much so. Make sure you can prove it. The last thing you would want us to do is go, okay, I know I had that loss, but you didn't actually verify it. Then when you go through and look at each of the three quarters, you're like, well, it was at 20%, 22%, and 24%. You can never prove the 25%. Then that would be bad. So make sure you can prove it. Again, with the SBDC, we provide free advising services. So what our primary thing we do is provide free one-on-one advising services. Here in San Diego and Imperial, I have over 120 professional advisors that either work full-time or part-time. Most work part-time, that assist businesses day in, day out, one-on-one, to be able to get it through these programs. So for example, if you need some help being able to show this and what that looks like and verify the calculations, reach out to us at the SBDC, and we'll get you with an advisor who can certainly help you to make sure that you have met that as well. One last thing I don't have on this slide as well is which I'll talk about a couple other places, but if I didn't, I would be remiss in mentioning all the applications must be filed by March 31st of 2020. That's when the program's deadlines is. So a couple extra things with PPP2. The big one is that the loans cannot exceed $2 million. And there's some extra components in there as well. And that is affiliated companies, that total cannot exceed $2 million. What do I mean by that? Well, of course, the original PPP allowed loans up to $10 million, and it was $10 million for each business entity. So let's take the example. Let's say I own 18 Jack in the Box franchises, and each one is an independent business that's in its own LLC. So the total for those PPP cannot exceed for all 18 franchises $2 million in this instance. Whereas before, I could get, let's say, 1 for 5, 1 for 2, 1 for 7, etc. That's not the case now. So they really are trying to cap the amount of money that goes out to ensure that the smallest businesses really are the ones getting the assistance. And that way, a few loans don't end up eating the vast majority of the money. Here we are towards the end of the week. Last I heard is that between the new for PPP2, it's about $55 to $60 billion that have been approved, and there was a total amount, I want to say, just over $350 billion. So there still is money, it's plenty of money available. So the key is you want to make sure you're accurate and do things. Other than that, PPP2 will literally work the same as all the updates from June of 2020. So that big update was, of course, the 60-40 and the 24 weeks of the 75-25 and the 8 weeks. What do I mean by that? That means at least 60% of the loan must be spent on qualified payroll expenses. Qualified payroll, talked a little bit about on the next slide too, but really is basically salaries, wages, tips, commissions, and your employer-sponsored health and employer-sponsored retirement and state payroll taxes, but not federal payroll taxes. So state unemployment, yes. FICA, no. So that's critical to understand. The other 40%, like I said before, like rent, utilities, or other expenses, which I'll show on the next slide. There are actually a few additional ones that are allowed. One piece of advice we have, it's not a requirement by anybody, but it's a recommendation, and it's just because it will make your life easier, is try and work with the exact same lender. So you worked with Bank of X or Bank Y or lender Z. If possible, work with them again. I emphasize, if possible. I already know of a number of lenders that I've heard of that did PPP1 are not doing PPP2. We do work with a number of different banks and lenders that are taking new clients and such. So certainly we know a number of those. You can reach out to us if you're having trouble with one. For either PPP1 or PPP2, we definitely know some outstanding lenders here in the San Diego market and the other SBDCs in other areas too. So a couple extra things as well. The big deal is for the heavily impacted restaurants, hospitality, accommodation areas. So these are certain businesses that have a particular what's called NAICS code, N-A-I-C-S. That is an industry classification system. And you can actually go to NAICS, N-A-I-C-S.com, and you can find out what your NAICS code is. It's actually probably going to be on any business loan you've ever received. If you file anything that's not a sole proprietor, Schedule C, you probably had to provide your NAICS code on your tax return. And so if you're what's called a NAICS 72, for example, a restaurant is 72111, and you are eligible for a higher loan amount. So let's say my average monthly payroll in 2019 for my restaurant was $100,000. My PPP1 was $250,000. Of course, spend all that, eligible expenses, good to go. I need a PPP2. Now I can get actually $350,000, which is critical for me to be able to maintain my operation. So that's the big plus for those industries that are hard hit. The other ones are certain types of nonprofits that were not eligible. Now can actually get their first PPP, and those are what are classified as 501c6 operations. Great examples of these are chambers of commerce. So what are some of the use of funds? Like I said, the no change is, of course, at least 60% on payroll expenses. The same as it was in June is the same as it is now. And so again, like I said, that is all W-2 wages that you pay as an employer and owner compensation. That's it. You pay 1099. So let's say I have 1099, what I call workers, independent contractors. They are not employees, nor are they owners of the company. So they do not count as payroll expense. W-2 wages and salaries, or owner, such as an owner draw from a that you would show on your net profit as a Schedule C, or perhaps a K-1 distribution that you may have for other types of organizations or entities. So that's what it's limited at. The most common question I get is, can I pay my 1099? No, they are not employees. That is not a payroll expense. That's a business expense. They're eligible for their own. So if I am a sole proprietor, I receive a 1099. I am eligible to pay myself from there. We have helped literally thousands of sole proprietors that do not have employees to be able to get a PPP, and that's a great benefit for them to be able to cover some, to be able to pay themselves as well as pay whatever their business expenses may be. So let's say, for example, I am, I'm an independent graphic designer, and I was able to work, and obviously all that work kind of dried up, and so I'm able to then qualify for a PPP, pay myself, and obviously I don't have any employees, as long as I pay for the eligible expenses. So the other 40%, of course, as before, rent, utilities, mortgage interest. Utilities means power, gas, water. But in addition now, covered worker protections. So that's such as buying face masks or any other face shields, other types of PPE that maybe you need to purchase, installing plexiglass, which is a really common one, or even improving certain types of ventilation systems is an eligible expense. Other ones are mainly software style operational expenses. Like, for example, I had, instead of people coming in to work, because it's an office space, when they came in, they were hourly, and they punched a time clock. Now that they're working from home, perhaps it's my customer service folks, I need an online time tracking system. That expense would be any uninsured, any property damage from civil unrest or other disasters that occurred in 2020 that wasn't covered by insurance could be covered. It could be an expense here, and also supplier costs. What I mean by supplier costs is, of course, the supply chain's been pretty heavily disrupted. For those of us who ordered something online during the holidays, we're going, will it arrive in time? We certainly are aware of the supplier chain disruptions. And so some of those disruptions could also be an eligible expense. So it is very easy to hit the 60/40 for the eligible expenses. So now we're going to walk through the applications. So if you need to find these applications, in addition to our website, you can see the link that's specifically there. But the reality is, the easiest thing to do is just remember this: sba.gov/PPP, and you'll find everything you need to do. So I'm going to kind of walk through the applications here. So the first draw application, so actually when you go to that link, it looks like this, and then you click on it, and this is the PDF it brings up. I have highlighted there something very important. There have been a lot of past PPP applications. So if you Google PPP application, you're going to get a whole string of them. That's why you want to make sure it's this one from the SBA that says the form was revised January 8th, 2021. You're seeing this in 3 weeks, and they've since come out with another revised form. It's later than January 8th. But just make sure you have that form, because that's the most recent form that they have. You also, when you apply, so let's say this is for folks who did not get a PPP. So examples, you know what, I just didn't get around to it. I got confused with the process. My bank just they denied me. I needed to find another lender, or I just thought I could get through, thinking things would end and I'd start to be able to open up in January. Now I know I can't, and so I really want a PPP, or I'm a Chamber of Commerce and I'm applying. A lot of reasons someone may have not got a PPP the first time. Now you can, and you use this form. So the top information is what you just complete, kind of standard, straightforward information. The next one's a teeny bit confusing, but only a teeny bit. When it asks for average monthly payroll, this is the confusing part. This is pre-pandemic payroll. What was your payroll in January? Or what was your average payroll for 2019? What was your average payroll the fourth quarter of 2019? It's pre-pandemic payroll. It's that information that you're looking for. That same thing over there where it says number of employees, where it is right here. That's the number of employees you had in January of 2019, not the number of employees you have today. Because again, they're trying to, with the goal of this program is to restore employment. So employees may be furloughed, laid off, etc. This is giving you the ability to pay them. The other is then you take that average monthly payroll, you multiply by 2.5, and that's your loan. So it's it's confusing where it asks that idle. Down below, it's going to give you some particular instructions with that. Follow the instructions your lender gave you if you received an economic injury disaster loan, not the grant, the loan. So if you got a loan where you signed loan documents with the Small Business Administration for a loan that is from the US federal government, you have a unique situation. Work with your lender, or the SBDC will help you with that. Most folks that didn't get a PPP probably also didn't get an idle, so it probably doesn't apply to you. After that, you're completing this basic information here. Check, of course, payroll costs, and then all others that apply. If you forget to check one and you use it on those covered expenses, you're okay. Then ownership information. The ownership information is very important that it's accurate, because the SBA is doing additional fraud checks. So they want to make sure, so let's say my business is Widgets Inc. and it has its own EIN, but I'm the owner. I would still have to provide my social security number and make sure that social security number does tie back with the business that I'm affiliated with. That I'm not just taking someone's business name, fraudulently putting that information on there to be able to get the loan and using their business name or EIN. Trust me, that actually happened. And so they're working on some additional checks. And you also need to provide all the owner information. So let's say, for example, I have 3 partners. I own 40%, the other 2 own 30%. All 3 of us would need to have that information there. What you'd want to be able to do is then after that, you answer all these questions honestly. And so they do have to do with, a couple of them are actually eligibility as it states above. In particular, I want to highlight on number 6, which has to do with felonies. And so any felony that you were convicted of, any owner that was convicted of in the last year, you're not eligible, and particular financial crimes over the last 5 years. Then make sure you read these. These are actual real important certifications, because you are certifying very specific things under the penalty of perjury. And so you want to make sure that you certainly understand what that is. Then you're actually initialing some additional certifications. So there's 2 that right there at the top that I want to highlight, this one and this one. And that is indicating that the business has not permanently closed. So in other words, you're getting this loan to continue operations of the business, or even kind of like open them back up. So I'm going to give an example of a closed and a not closed, where that would fit. Let's say 2018, 19, for many years, I'd owned a dry cleaning business. The pandemic hit, no one was wearing suits anymore. No one needed their clothes dry cleaned. Everyone's wearing sweatpants now. And so I decided, you know what? I don't want to continue to pay the rent or the additional expenses. I'm going to close the business. I am not eligible for the loan. I am a restaurant. The additional stay-at-home orders here in California came about in December. I decided to shut down for an 8-week period of time until where we are kind of about now, where you're able to have outdoor dining again. I am eligible because my intent is to reopen the business. So those are kind of the 2 ways to look at it. So if you have permanently closed the business, you are not eligible for this. So that's an important thing to be able to do. And the other one is just right down here at the bottom. I'm not going to talk about this program extensively, but if you do apply for a shuttered venue operator grant, which is also known as Save Our Stages, you're not eligible for a PPP. So not going to talk too much about that. It's a real niche-y grant. If you have questions about that, go to our website. There's some information there, and you can reach out to us. So that's PPP2. So PPP1, excuse me, and then PPP2, the second draw. Same thing. You can find it actually at sba.gov/PPP, and we're going to take a look at that application. So again, it's going to say second draw borrower application form. Make sure you use that right form. Key thing with these forms are, yes, you can get them from the SBA. Yes, you can download and fill them out. Your lender will have a specific way they want this information conveyed. They may use it's distinctly possible or probable, they'll use this very form, but they will want to send it back to you in terms of like DocuSign or other ways to verify all the certifications. Why? Because they're ultimately liable for verifying you're affiliated with the business, and that you have legally signed this form, because they're certifying that also to the SBA, because that's their job. So same sort of thing, you complete all the information here. And again, this is where the NAICS code goes, because the NAICS code is important. Because like it says here, now for NAICS, if you have those first two start with a 72, again, I'm a restaurant, 72,111. Now you multiply by 3.5. So the average monthly payroll, 99 times out of 100, you're going to use the same information that you used on your original PPP application. So let me reiterate that. Use the same information here, all of these lines above here. If it is identical, obviously except for the math here, if you're 3.5, your application will be going through the SBA sooner. A couple of things that are important. Yes, if your payroll increased for some reason in 2020, and gave employees cost of living increases, or for a reason like that, you can increase that number. But this is the number that you want to leave the same. So the same number you put on your PPP1 application in April or May or June of 2020, you want that number to be exactly the same thing. And that has been a big flag that has caused some issues with some PPP2 applications that we learned from the SBA. So you want that information the same. Yes, this number can increase, but you'll obviously want to work with your lender on it, etc. If that number is the same as your PPP1 application, like I said before, it will go through more smoothly. Doesn't mean you're not going to get approved otherwise, but it will result in additional questions you may get asked. Then again, check the same information. You do need to provide your first draw loan number. So that loan number you will need to provide. You get that from your lender, you get that from then again, you're providing the information specifically for where that gross receipt deduction is. So the example I have here is I'm a retail space and I had $100,000 in gross receipts in 2019 from October through December. And then the same October through December in 2020, that same fiscal quarter, I received $50,000. Clearly I qualify. If I use, for example, let's say it's the same thing, but it's for April through June, that would be the second quarter. And so you want to make sure you have that correct. And it does need to be the fiscal quarters, so you can't just pick June through August, for example, as what your quarter is. It does need to be the standard fiscal quarters. After that, the information is the same for the ownership information, same types of questions from an eligibility standpoint. The certification is a little bit shorter because it's it's related back to your PPP1. And same sort of thing, not permanently closed. So maybe you were trying to maintain operations when you got your PPP1, have since decided to close down. Nope, you can't do that. Then you are certifying the 25% loss. You are doing that. You're certifying that under the penalty of perjury. And you're certifying that you spent your first draw PPP on eligible expenses. So that's what it is for. So understand all those types of things are really important when you're applying for your PPP2. So go back to the presentation. Forgiveness. A couple of quick updates on this. So the big confusion that happened for a long time was how that EIDL advance. What was the EIDL advance? That was when you applied for your EIDL, literally 18 million people applied for this and received a grant between $1,000 and $10,000. And that would probably shown up in your bank account under SBA, US Treasury, or something like that as a direct deposit, again, between $1,000 and $10,000. That was going to lower your forgiveness of your original PPP loan by that amount. Now, did the SBA and all the banks and lenders want to have literally millions of $1,000 to $10,000 1% loans on the books? No. Congress fixed that. So that one does not have to do with the other. Number two is it resulted in an update of all the forgiveness application forms that came out, I want to say like January 19th, January 20th, so a little over a week ago. The most important one is if your loan was under $150,000, this new form is very short, very straightforward. It does have a lot of legalese on it. Make sure you read it, but work with your lender to provide that new form. Now is the time to apply for your PPP forgiveness for that first loan. All the rules, regulations have gotten clarified, shaken out. This last law really did all the cleanup that had been pending, that the SBA and the US Treasury were waiting on, got all that cleaned up. And so these are the forms you're going to want to use. lenders know what they need to do much better now. The SBA knows what it needs to do much better now. And I think there's been around $100 billion now that's already been forgiven. So, if you need assistance with that, that's what we're here to be able to do. Like I said, we provide one-on-one assistance and be able to help you kind of walk through what that needs to be. And most of the lenders are helping out too. A couple other things, not going to get into detail. There's some great tax implications and tax updates related to PPP. The big one is of course, that the PPP forgiveness portion is not considered taxable. So that's certainly going to benefit you. If you go to our that same website, which here I'll show in a minute, you can actually view and click on a federal, kind of a tax implication webinar. Had some fantastic CPAs, because I am not a CPA. You kind of get on that are from Moss Adams and really talk about everything from the employee retention tax credit, how PPP is treated, and some other kind of nuances that we discussed at a webinar earlier this week. I highly recommend you view that, understand kind of what a lot of the tax implications are, because there can be some pretty significant tax benefits for you to talk to with your tax professional. So that's what I have from a presentation. So hopefully we got some questions in the chat, which we do. I'll head back there. So we'll start right after the Ford Bronco. So let's see. Michael says, we're most interested in information on the EIDL loans as we don't qualify for second round of PPP. Yeah, so this was on PPP. The new EIDL, there's still pending some additional information that's coming out. Yes, it's open. If you did not get an EIDL loan last year, up to $150,000, you can apply. Reach out to us, we can help you. Then there's going to be some additional updates. Literally every day, the SBA is saying it's coming out tomorrow, and that's been for about 10 days now. So when Irina asks, I didn't understand about the owner salary and draws. Are those expenses to be included in payroll expenses for PPP? My answer is yes. So let's go back to that particular slide. So we go back here on what is payroll. So what is payroll? Two things. Obviously, all your W-2. That's crystal clear. What owner is so let's say, for example, I'm a sole proprietor. I own a business. I file a 1040, and I have all my expenses on a Schedule C. What that dollar amount is, what my final net profit amount is, that is what's classified as my owner draw, or legally considered that. And so that would be it. I have an S Corp or an LLC. Maybe I take and I have a K1 distribution instead of a W-2 wage for myself as an owner. That dollar amount that was received as an average monthly amount in 2019 is what would be considered owner. So you take that owner pay plus the W-2 wages. That's what it adds up. If it's just me and I don't have employees, that's what the calculation would be. Scott asks, we applied a few weeks ago on the SBA website, never encountered this form. Not sure what you applied for, because these are the PPP forms that came out on January 8th. And as you can see, that's crystal clear. That is, straight up from the SBA's website, sba.gov. This is where it is. And so maybe you applied for EIDL, or maybe you didn't. So I'd be kind of curious what you particularly saw. Michael asks, maybe do a separate webinar on EIDL loans. I will when the new rules come out, and that's why I haven't done it, is because we're waiting on additional information, just like I didn't do a PPP webinar until the rules came out right around January 11th. Scott asks, if we received an EIDL but not a PPP1, are we eligible for PPP2? No, you're eligible for PPP1. PPP2 is only if you spent down all of your PPP1 funds. So that's the number one thing, is you must have received a PPP1 and spent it all down. Fine, then just get a PPP1. So that's what you'll be able to do. And so there's nothing wrong with that. I literally was helping somebody earlier this week, similar situation, didn't think that really needed. It's gone on way too long, and I was helping him apply for his PPP1. Keith says, the SBA website is very cryptic. Yes, it is. I received an EIDL advance, but no additional funds, $4,000. I don't even know where or how to log in, or my lender is how I pay it back. If you receive $4,000, that's a grant. You don't have to pay it back to anybody. So that is 100% a grant. So Keith, what I recommend is you reach out to us at the SBDC. We'll kind of be able to help you understand it. Yes, I understand it's cryptic. It's written in government. We have a kind of a joke. One of my service center directors, he calls government lawyer as a particular language. And so, we're here to be able to help you kind of translate for some of that and be able to get it back. So, but that $4,000 that you received as an idle advance is a grant. You do not need to pay it back. So that's the good thing there. So Scott says, we did not receive a PP1, applied for PPP2, but not lenders were interested. What do we do? Again, same as I said before, Scott, you need to apply for a PPP1. Reach out to the SBDC. We can connect you with a number of different lenders that are good lenders that are out there that are still doing PPP1 loans. So Michael asks, can I review again the qualifications for PPP2 regarding the 25% deduction? You mentioned comparison with different quarters. All right, so we've got that up right here. So actually, I'm going to bring it to the application. I think the application says it best here. So when you look at this down here, this is where you're going to do it. So what you're going to do, so let's say I'm going to compare my October through December, aka Q4 2019 to October to December 2020, Q4 2020. And so I would say, okay, so in my bank, I'm going to go real simple. I'm just going to use my bank deposits. In 2019, I had deposits of $50,000. In 2020, I had deposits of $20,000. That is absolutely reduction. Let's say it again, though, but let's take a look at it in different. So I'm looking at different quarters, and I had all 4 quarters in 2019 were $50,000. And then in 2020, I had one that was 40, one that was 45, one that was 25. I'm going to want to pick the quarter that was the 25,000 because that's where where it certainly would meet the particular rule. And so again, reach out to us, the SBDC, an advisor easily. And again, our services are free. So you absolutely should reach out to us. We can kind of help you show what some of that is. Laura Donna asks, calculation, certainly. Let's go back to here. So 60% on payroll, absolutely. So you must use at least 60% on payroll costs. Payroll costs, again, all W-2 wages, compensation, salary, hourly, commissions, etc. All of that's included. Your owner drop, which I just explained a moment ago for the other question. Then related expenses to the W-2 wages that are such as if you pay for an employer-sponsored healthcare, let's say you have, a particular healthcare plan, the part you pay is the employer, the portion you pay to the retirement accounts, and state payroll taxes like state disability insurance. That's also included. And so that's really what that particularly is. Then after that, the 40% are on other business operation expenses. Not to expand the business, not to go buy a new Ford Bronco. It is to pay the rent, your monthly rent. So I get a loan and I'm able to pay my March rent with it. I get a loan, I'm able to pay my March electric bill. I get a loan, I'm able to pay for additional plexiglass. I get a loan, I'm able to pay for that weird supplier cost because things got kind of funky with my supply chain. So those are what are the eligible expenses. Garrett asks, I applied for the idle grant loan, was denied. I don't sell products. I provided a service, which I did put in cost of goods sold section. Garrett, that's going to reopen any day now. And so before you apply again with that, reach out to the SBDC and they can kind of walk, and one of our advisors will be able to walk you through as you fill out that application. You can just get on a Zoom like we're doing right now. You can share your screen and they can help you kind of make sure you answer those questions more accurately to be able to get it. Same thing for Robert here. But if you need to apply for reconsideration, I literally have thousands of folks get reconsideration. Where they've either had anything from credit histories to not demonstrating things. We've gotten literally thousands of those reconsidered. So reach out to us. We can help you with that particular process. Laura Donna, so to qualify for PPP2, you must have depleted the funds from the PPP1. Yes, by law, you needed to have depleted those funds by December 31st. So that's the way in which your loan docs would have said anyway. So absolutely, you must have done that. and on eligible expenses. So just the same type of expenses that I'm showing here on this slide. Robert asks, so how long will I know before I'm going to get the EIDL grants? I have absolutely no idea. Like I said, the SBA keeps telling us they're going to have new information on the EIDL grants coming out, and well, still waiting. So when I get it, I will put it up on our website, and I can't predict how soon or slow that they will be able to do. Irina asks, are we eligible for PPP2 if only one of the quarters has more than 25% reduction? Yep, you only need to show one. So like I said before, I had in 2019 gross receipt deposits every single quarter at $50,000. Then in 2020, 40,000, 35,000, and 25,000. I'm going to want to use the one that clearly meets it at the 25,000. You only need to show it for one. I actually was helping one very early on with this, and we were looking at their particular expenses, and we found there was one quarter in particular that did meet it and two other quarters that did not at all. And so it was like, yep, you absolutely qualify based on the quarter that did have that reduction. So certainly you could have that. Then Jacinth received a PPP1, which you used to pay rent, and my contract workers. I have since take the business from profit to nonprofit. For me to apply for a loan, what do I really need to do for apply for a PPP1 or 2? That's a really unique situation because you change the business structure. So information that would be at that top portion of the application, so like right here, has completely changed because it's a new business structure. So reach out to us because to us on that one, and then we'll probably want to talk to the lender and really kind of see what some of the clear distinctions are from you for what how your business structures change, because that's a really unique and different type of situation. Scott asks, can you get EIDL grant and a PPP2 loan? Absolutely. PPP and EIDL, completely separate. You of course can do that. Yusuf asked, I opened my business in September of 2019, barely had business in 2019. Are you eligible for a PPP1 loan? You're eligible, but like you said, you clarified, you put that in there. You barely had any business, so it's going to be a very, very small one. The smallest PPP loan from the first round that I ever heard of was $300. So they go really small, and I know that we helped a whole bunch of folks get loans that were and hundreds of loans that were less than $10,000. So again, it's not probably a lot of money, but it's better than nothing, and it is something that certainly you can do. All right, that's all the questions I see in there. Anyone else have any other questions that you want to drop in the chat? All right, well, I'm going to bring up here again. That website is where we update all the information. We also have recorded webinars for this. We have, and as I said, we're updating the information for some of the other programs. And so when the new EIDL information comes out, that's where we'll post that information and probably have at least a recorded webinar or two about that as well. So Faustine, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Danny, for taking time out of your busy day to present our webinar. I know all of our businesses appreciate this information. Please reach out to the SBDC. Like Danny mentioned, they are free to you as a business owner to provide these resources and help. So we don't want you to fall to any scammers out there. We've heard a lot of businesses fall to scammers when it comes to these loans. So please make sure to reach out to these resources because they are there to help you. So again, if you did miss any part of this webinar, you need to review it. We will go ahead and send a link to everyone who registered. But thank you everyone for attending. Please stay safe out there and have a great weekend.